Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Clobear, and if you're new here, this is where I talk about pretty much everything that has to do with adulting. So I talk about money, I talk about relationships, I talk about mental health, and I talk about personal growth. So if that's something you're into, stick around. Today we're gonna be talking about how to make a budget. First of all, I started making a budget. I was into the Dave Ramsey cult. Did I say cult? I said cult. So I graduated right after the 2008 recession. I went back home and I moved in with my parents. And my parents kind of helped me get started on budgeting because I was so tired of not having any money. I started with the Dave Ramsey method, which is basically pulling out all of the money that you're gonna spend for the week in cash and putting it into different envelopes with different categories. Over the years, that kind of evolved because I continued kind of using that methodology, but I stopped using physical envelopes after probably about 3 or 4 years. I moved to China during that time frame. Actually, Wuhan, China, weirdly enough. I moved to China, and so I kept up with the envelope method, and really my only expenses were groceries, entertainment, personal, which can be anything from like a hairbrush to like shampoo. So that was the third category, and then the fourth category was transportation. So cabs, gas, whatever it is. In China, it was just refilling my Metro card. That continued until I got back from China, and I started using an app instead to try and I'm pretty sure it was called the Envelopes app, where I continued to do this really basic type of budgeting where I'm not necessarily tracking everything I spend. I just take out money when I need it, and if it's there, it's there. If it's not, I can borrow from another envelope, or I just can't spend money. I didn't do very well on that, and over the years, when I got further and further away from it, I started spending hundreds of extra dollars every 2 weeks, even though I really wasn't making that much money when I moved to Chicago. I was still paying my student loans, so that's good, but I wasn't putting any extra money on my student loans, which now that I'm actually tackling those student loans, I really wish I had. Lived paycheck to paycheck, didn't have much of a savings. I think I maybe managed to keep $1,000 in saving the whole time, and I'd continue to spend on travel and eating out and drinking a lot because I was finally in the city with my friends and all of that. Spending kind of got out of control in 2015, the first year that I lived back in the United States, in the first year I ever lived in Chicago. So I started this blog in 2017, and at the time I was living with an boyfriend at the time, obviously. We were just always underwater with money, and he didn't really budget his money because he was an entrepreneur, so he didn't ever have a steady paycheck. It was just kind of like 1 month he'd get $20,000, and then 3 months he wouldn't get anything. So that was his argument for not budgeting, and he and I had very different ideas on what it was important to spend money on. While we lived together, I just never had any money because if I wasn't paying for our bills, I was paying for something else that happened with our dog, who had a ton of problems, and I was giving him a lot of different loans for his. So it was just a really stressful time. By the time we broke up, and yes, he paid me back everything, in 2018, I was still in that kind of cycle of spending and never really being able to catch up, even though every year that I lived in Chicago, I got a raise. So I was constantly bringing in more money, but I never felt like I had more money. And finally in 2018, I think it was September 2018, I decided I can't do this anymore. I'm going to track every single dollar that I spend. I did it for 2 weeks, and I was totally freaking disgusted with myself because I spent so much money on eating and drinking and being hungover. They weren't even abnormally spendy weeks where I would be spending $600 just on eating and drinking. That's insane. And so as I was kind of going through my categories and realizing how much money I was actually spending versus what I thought I was spending, I just kind of started to cringe and realize that where we spend our money is where our values go. As I realized what I was spending my money on, I was like, this is what I value. I value going out and getting drinks more than I value travel, because I was spending more money on going out and eating out and getting drinks and being hungover and ordering and food than I did traveling. I spent more money on that than I did on travel, and I was realizing if I spent $600 on eating out and drinking in 2 weeks, That could have been a ticket to Germany to see my friend, or it could have been a round trip ticket to California, where I love. It was a really big rude awakening, but it kind of is what I needed in order to get started on the path that I'm on. Last year, and from the time that I started from 2018, which was like September 2018 to September 2019, I paid off my car and I put down $20,000 on debt that year. It was a huge shift in my mindset of I want my money to go where I value, and I want my values to reflect my spending and my spending to reflect my values. That's how I got into budgeting, and so I kind of wanted to share how to start budgeting for yourself. So first, the very first step in starting a budget is doing exactly what I did, which is tracking everything you spend for 2 weeks to a month. If you don't know all of your standard expenses that happen monthly, then I would recommend doing it for a month, just so it's easier to set up your categories rather than doing any guesswork or any research. But if it's easy for you to look up all the different things that you spend your money on in a month, including like your cable or your internet or your subscriptions, whatever it is, then you can just do it for a couple of weeks, or you can even just take a look at all your credit card transactions that show you all the things that you spend your money on. So I found it to be the most enlightening, and also I think it's just a good practice to start tracking everything you spend, because it will make you think twice about whether or not you want to spend your money on something. I had never tracked everything that I spent, and I thought it was a weird idea when I decided to start doing it, but now I do it every day, and I don't even think about it, and I actually enjoy it, so I know where I'm at. It's like a spending plan rather than this really restrictive, like you can't spend money on it. It's like when I see that I have money in something, like in a category, whether it's personal, entertainment, whatever it is, that gives me a lot of relief knowing I have money in the bank for this category to spend. It's a lot easier than being afraid of looking at your money, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So once you track everything that you spend, then it is the time for you to start looking at that list. And like when I say track everything that you spend, you can literally write down everything that you spent in a little notebook. For me, that was the best way to do it, because it was like an experience. It's not just like entering it into your phone. Now I do it on my phone, but when I wanted to get started and I really wanted to be more mindful of what I was spending, I was tracking literally everything into a notebook that I kept with myself. Or when I'd come home at night, I'd think, okay, what did I spend money on? And then I would track it. I wish I still had that notebook. I'm pretty sure I don't. But when those 2 weeks were up, that's when I discovered how much money I was spending on alcohol and drinking and eating out and being hungover, like ordering Grubhub and all that stuff. That's when I was like, okay, this is what I'm already spending in entertainment. What do I think is a reasonable amount of money for me to be spending on entertainment? I'm currently spending $600 every 2 weeks on entertainment. What do I think is a reasonable amount for me to cut that down to? And so I think at the time I picked $150. That was a reasonable amount for me to start focusing in on and trying for, because $600 is freaking insane. That was what I went with. Looked at transportation, looked at all my Uber receipts, all my Metra, my gasoline, all of those things. I don't remember what the cost was, but let's say it was $200. And I was like, well, there's a lot of Ubers in here, and I could be a little bit more mindful in how many Ubers I'm taking. So every 2 weeks, maybe I'll only spend $100 on transportation. So kind of go through there and recognize what are your categories. Your categories are going to look different from my categories. Maybe you have a special kind of sport that you play, whether it's skydiving or rugby. That's okay. Put a category for sports or recreation or whatever it is. Whatever makes sense to you is what's gonna work for you. And the thing too is these categories aren't set in stone. You can change them as you continue on your budgeting journey. You can check out my categories right here. Those have changed over time, and now I have way more categories than what I did when I was doing the envelope method, but that's because it helps me keep track of everything. And there are certain things that I don't want to spend a lot of money on, and then there are certain things where I'm like, I need to know how much money I'm spending on dating. At this time in my life, I don't actually value dating very much. I realize there are certain things that again, because I do values-based spending, There are certain things I don't want to be spending a lot of money on. Some people don't like having that amount of structure. I like having this amount of structure. I'm very type A and I really enjoy, I'm just petting my dog over here, it's fine. To me, that makes me feel like I have more control. It makes me feel good that I'm spending money in areas where I want to be spending money versus spending a shit ton of money on alcohol, which is not something I actually value. So my categories have changed over the years, especially too since I recently moved. I now have a category for things like parking because I don't have a personal car anymore. I would rather be spending less money on transportation overall. But I also realized last year that I was spending too much money in personal, and I was kind of using it as a dump bucket for anything that I could fit into that category that I had already overspent on, say, entertainment, so I would just dump money into there. I split out other things, so like I took special occasions out of personal and I made a special occasions category because I wanted things like presents and surprise visits and things like that to go into that category. And I also last year just realized, because I spent $10,000 on travel last year, I realized I needed to have a budget item for travel. So that's how mine has changed. And what's nice about it too is I can literally look at my yearly budget and see, oh, so these are the things that I value. I spend the most money on travel, my home, oh, and paying off debt. So those are my top 3 expenses. It's my home, paying off debt, and travel. So I feel really good about that because that is very much aligned with who I want to be and the things that are important to me. So once you get into your categories and you figure that out, you basically, if you want to do the envelope method, you can do the envelope method where at the beginning of every pay period, you put that certain amount of money that you are going to spend during that pay period or that you budgeted for during that pay period into that envelope. I don't use cash anymore. I like using credit cards because I like using credit card points. But if you're not good with using credit cards, or if you don't pay your credit card off every single month, then I would recommend starting with the cash approach because it's really good at giving you a hard stop on when you can't spend any more money because you have no money in the bank or in your envelope. I will also leave a link to my spreadsheet that I use to keep track of it. I am old school in that I don't use any apps because I have not found any apps that I think work the best for me. And the way that I track money in my app, in my spreadsheet, is that anytime I spend money, whether it's with a credit card or if it's with a debit card or if it's in cash, I track that. That way when I go to pay off my card, I don't have to track it again. If you're swiping your credit card, you don't have to track that twice. You only track it when you swipe the credit card. When you pay off your credit card, you don't have to track it again. Once you finish your spreadsheet and you set up your spreadsheet, you're going to track every single day what you spend money on. I usually do it as soon as I spend money. So as soon as I spend money, I will enter that into my spreadsheet and then I will forget about it. It's a habit. I don't even think about it now, and I actually get excited to see where my numbers are at, and it again gives me some peace. Thing to keep in mind too is your budget's gonna change, and it should change. The amount of money that you spend each 2 weeks or each month, depending on when you get paid, that is going to change because of the things that you have on your calendar. So say you have 2 birthday parties coming up in the next couple of weeks. Well, you're going to have to spend money out of your birthday present category or your personal category, whatever category it is that you're taking money out for birthday parties. But then the next couple of months you may not have any birthday parties, so then you don't spend any money on birthday party presents. It's gonna adjust, and it should adjust because it should be fitting to your life. I have found that it sets me up for failure when I don't adjust my budget, because if I see that I'm over a category, that I've already overspent in a category, then it's kind of like that screw this mentality comes into place, where it's like if I eat a slice of cake, it's like, oh, well, I've ruined the whole day, so I might as well eat the whole cake. It's the same way with money, where it's like if I've already spent $20 over in entertainment, might as well just spend a ton of money in entertainment this month or 2 weeks because I've already screwed it up. So that's why I continually adjust, because I end up spending less money if I go over budget with the budget numbers that I'm like, I can't change these. I found that that's not actually very helpful. So What I will say too is if you overspend in a category one budgeting period, you need to keep track of that. So if you have yearly budgeting goals where you want to be sure to only spend 50% of your take-home income, that's my goal. I'm not going to make it 100%, but I am going to get really close. But if you have big goals like that, it's really smart for you to keep a yearly budget as well. And I'll do another post about how to create a yearly budget and how to keep that updated. So I have another post on how to update your budget once you've finished a budgeting period. So check that out. I'll leave a link to it right here. If you have any questions on budgeting, please leave some comments so that I can answer them. And if you enjoyed this video, freaking like it, please, because that helps me. And if you are enjoying this content, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, and if you have any other questions for me, please let me know, and have a good rest of your day. So, thanks guys!